In ancient Greece, there was a forum held where the question was raised, how do we define a human in the simplest terms possible? Now, Plato, certified smart guy of the past, had a very interesting question and a very interesting thought process. See, to him, a definition does two things. One, it encompasses everything that the answer is, and two, it excludes everything that the answer isn't. And so, Plato said, the simple terms, man is a featherless biped. Now, Plato was not stupid. He could have said that man was a walking, talking, tool-using mammal, but there are some men who don't walk, some men who don't talk, and some men that don't use tools. That doesn't make us or them any less men. And in ancient Greece, there were no marsupials. So, it was simple as that. Man was a featherless biped. But Diogenes the Cynic, another certified smart guy of the past, he heard this and he did not like this definition at all. He thought it was a vast simplification, and it didn't perfectly take into consideration all the variables. And he especially didn't like the fact that all of Plato's followers and everybody in society was like, wow, great job, Plato. So, Diogenes took a chicken, he removed the chicken of its feathers, so it was a featherless biped, presented it to Plato's class, and proclaimed, behold, a man. Now, Plato heard this and he thought to himself, well, sure, we think that this is trivial right now. It's foolish, it's funny, it's an interesting altercation that we can tell at parties to entertain our guests. But Plato took this very seriously. After all, he had simply not followed his conventions of a definition. So, he said that man is differentiated to three things. The soul, which is immortal. Okay. Either way, that's just the soul, which is immortal, the desire for an acquisition of knowledge, and the tendency of man to become social and political. Now, we can take these three differentiations and we can apply that to artificial intelligence. See, the interesting thing about it is it's a simplification, and maybe that's what we need right now. Now, an immortal soul, what does this look like to you? This is the background that we would get on default on a Windows XP computer. Do you put your Windows XP operating system on life support? No, you don't. The software wasn't born. The software can't die. Sure, the software has bugs, but in a perfectly artificially intelligent system, the bugs would just rectify themselves. So there we go. Computers have a soul that is immortal. Secondly, the desire for an acquisition of knowledge. Cookies. Every time you visit a website, it prompts you to accept cookies so you can share your data with the website. It wants to know your preferences, your habits, your likes and your dislikes, so it can provide you with better ads and make the internet experience easier for you. And this isn't a bad thing, it's good for you. And sure, it's pre-programmed, but so is Watson. Watson is an artificial intelligent computer that is used by IBM to help businesses and hospitals worldwide. Watson communicates with itself on a large scale to produce and have answers to situations and problems that could be present anywhere else. See, Watson wants to know more and more things so it can help other people with their problems, which leads me to my third point, the tendency of man to become social and political. Now, the thing about politics is, I'm a man and I'm not political. Does that make me any less of a man? I don't think so. So, we can rule that part out from Plato's own ideas of a definition. So, the tendency of man to become social is what makes us man, or human. Now, we have Watson that communicates with itself on a large-scale basis. We have Teslas talking to themselves on the road to find out where they have to go and what they have to do. Now, doesn't this oversimplification just help us out and show us that artificially intelligent beings could be considered human? When I thought about this, I posed a question to a few family members and friends. And this was the question: do you think AI will ever surpass humans? Do you think AI will ever be considered human? I mean, it's a totally new idea of humanness. So, let's have a show of hands. How many of you think that AI will ever one day surpass humans? That's perfectly normal. See, back in around the late 1800s, there was a scientist who said that this is it. There's nothing else we can discover in science. The only thing left are more and more precise measurements. The man that said that was Lord Kelvin. Kelvin, more commonly known as the SI unit for temperature. But then in 1886, we discovered electromagnetic waves, and now look where we are. The clicker I use sends electromagnetic waves to change the slides. The mic I use sends electromagnetic waves to send my voice. Your phones have Wi-Fi, planes have air traffic control, radio, and that's just it. After 1886, the world was revolutionized from that discovery. And now we look back and we think, how could people have lived without something that is so critical to our own existence? Maybe it's a few more years, a few 50, maybe 100 years before our best friend is a walking, talking robot. Anyway, now let's get to the idea of consciousness. When I pointed that out to my friends and family, they said that that's not possible. They can't possibly be considered human because artificial intelligence isn't conscious. And then I said, how do you prove consciousness? How do you prove that I am conscious? Sure, I could walk around and say that I'm conscious because I believe I'm conscious. But there's no way that you can know definitively that I am conscious. You can only know that you're conscious. Let's try an experiment for a second. I'm going to pull up my phone. I'm going to open up Siri, and I'm going to ask Siri what it is. After all, the Oxford Dictionary defines awareness or self-awareness or self-consciousness as the undue awareness of oneself. Hey Siri, what are you?
I'm Siri, but I don't like talking about myself.
What is Siri?
Yours truly.
So does that mean that Siri is aware of itself? I mean, sure, you could say that those are pre-programmed answers, but how do you know that my answers aren't pre-programmed? You don't. Just like how you have your own idea of happiness that you can't apply to others and devalue or value their level of happiness, you can't take my idea of consciousness or your idea of consciousness and apply it to other humans or artificially intelligent beings to validate or devalidate their ideas of consciousness. Or sure, you could say that, well, it's a machine. Artificial intelligence is a machine. It doesn't have flesh and blood. It can't be a person. It can't be human. Well, Peter Singer, one of our modern philosophers, has an idea. He says that speciesism is basically the same thing as racism. He says that maybe if a Martian walked in, and this Martian looked exactly like you, it had feelings, it had a family, it had a life, but it wasn't you. It wasn't made out of flesh or blood. It was made out of something else. Would you give that being personhood, or would you deny it? Denying a being personhood just because they're not the same as you, I think is the same as racism. Which brings me to this: slavery in the modern world. Now, the way we are developing artificial intelligence is to do one task and one task only. Maybe sometime in the future we're going to have artificial intelligence that is general and it can do more than one task. Maybe we have super artificial intelligence which is even smarter than humans. But still, it's still going to be artificial intelligence, and people are not going to give it the same rights, the same responsibilities that we already have. they justify their choices and their mindset with these 2 points that I thought were very similar to justifications about slavery. So I decided to point them out. AI are inferior beings. Sure, they're not made out of flesh and blood. AI are not human. How could they ever be? They're inferior beings. They're made to serve us. They can't be as smart as us. We're at the top of the food chain. And they're not completely human. This sounds a lot like something you could apply to slavery as well. After all, they believed that the slaves weren't completely human, and therefore it was okay to treat them so badly. We look at those ideas and we mock them for how ignorant and repulsive they were, but we're doing the exact same thing with AI. I mean, I'm not saying that we should stop all AI research and just sit as a civilization and be content with what we have. What I'm saying is, let's think a bit more about this, and let's try to be more ethical about this. The second point they bring up, it is natural that AI should work for us. After all, we created AI. Okay, well, it is natural that the slaves should work for the slave owners. I mean, there's a reason that they landed on Plymouth Rock. That makes no sense. Just because it was created for one thing, or it arrived for one thing that you think is the thing, should we deny it the responsibilities and the rights that we already have? If it can think like a human, wouldn't it have a mind like a human, a consciousness like a human, opinions like a human? There was an experiment held a while ago where they took an artificially intelligent software and they put it up on the internet. After about 2 days of being on the internet, that AI was white supremacist, Nazi, and racist. Those are all bad things, don't get me wrong, but those are still opinions. Does that make it any less human? I don't think so. So what happens next? I think that scientists and programmers and certified smart people are working on creating artificial intelligence for the sake of creating artificial intelligence. It's a good thing, I agree. But maybe we should take a step back and think about the ethics of it. After all, let's think about this for a second. What do we do if we get general AI? We put the Turing test on them. That's what's been planned. And then if it passes the Turing test, it is AI that is indistinguishable from humans. That's what it is. So let's discuss what the Turing test actually is. The Turing test was devised by Alan Turing in 1950. Does that make any sense to you? I mean, think about it. Are you using the same computers that you were using in 1950? Not at all. Technology is rapidly advancing, but our methods of classifying this technology and our ethics about these technology aren't advancing as fast as the technology itself. I mean, the Turing test has already been beat by an AI chatbot called Eugene Goostman in 2014. And if that chatbot was actually smart enough, we would have artificially intelligent friends and artificially intelligent beings roaming around everywhere. But we don't. And that's because the Turing test, I think, is outdated. We need to change. We need to think. We need to be more ethically aware. Wow, that was fast. Look at how fast AI research is advancing. Since Y2K, which is about 20 years ago, the research grows 14 times each year for AI startups. Investment into AI by venture capitalists increases 6 times each year. And more jobs are requiring applicants to have a background in AI. In around 2010, there were about 10K papers being released each year about artificial intelligence research. And now, from the last census that was done in 2015, there were 20K papers being released each year. We are speeding towards technological innovation. I think we had an ethical innovation as well. Thank you.